I'm the founder and host of CRE Radio and TV, and I am super excited about today's guest. My guest today is Neal Bawa with Grow Capitus. I think that I have stated that correctly. We do apparently have an issue with regard to the chat, so if you would, and you have any questions, I may not be able to respond on the chat, but I may be able to respond live. So we'll do it that way. And at some point, if there are any questions or comments, we will take a brief break and get to those questions and comments. As I said, my guest is Neal Bawa, but before we get to Neal, why don't we take a brief station identification? Okay, so we are now back live, and let me bring in Neal. Neal, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Howard. Thanks for having me on the show. Very excited to be here.
So what we're going to be talking about, and I missed that, was the 5 perils of opportunity zones. So, Neal, you have spoken about this on a number of different occasions, but before we get to that, why don't you mention, give us your elevator speech about who you are and why you are, no pun intended, qualified to speak on this topic.
Sounds good. Well, unlike most of the people that show up on your show, I am not real estate royalty. I'm a technologist that accidentally fell into real estate through my day job in tech, and part of that job was to build campuses. So these were campuses that I was building from scratch, and $6 million, $8 million campuses, and that's how I got into real estate. And over the last decade and a half of personal and communal real estate investing, I built a portfolio of about $200 million. There's properties, multifamily and student housing in 10 U.S. states. And I currently have about 1,800 investors looking at my projects. And because a lot of my newer projects have been new construction, I've been looking at opportunity zones with a lot of excitement. And I've actually funded my first opportunity zone project. So looking forward to chatting about opportunity zones, their benefits, and also their perils.
Yes, and that's the topic for today. So why don't we get right into the topic? You gave me a note that 80% of opportunity zones are in areas that may never improve. My question for you is, one, why is it important that they improve? And then let's talk about the indicia, how to look for those areas that will improve or not improve.
Sure. So opportunity zones have been called one of the greatest tax benefits of all time. Some people have said this is the greatest real estate benefit of our generation. All of that is true. But the question to ask is, why is the government giving up so much tax? What is their purpose? Well, their purpose is for these areas to improve. Opportunity zones are census tracts. Some of them are fairly large, might be 10 miles by 10 miles, and some of them are fairly small, maybe half a mile by half a mile. And the census tract is a piece of land. It's a neighborhood that is somehow not keeping up with the Joneses. Areas around it are higher in income, they're higher in home price, they're higher in terms of employment levels. So this is an area that's been left behind. And so the concept of improvement in the area is very central to opportunity zones. So whenever we talk about opportunity zones, we have to talk about improvement in the quality of the area, because that is the core concept of opportunity zones.
Right. So let me get kind of fine-tune that a bit, if you don't mind. One of the most exciting parts of investing in an opportunity zone project is the issue that after 10 years, you won't be paying any taxes on the capital gains that you earn on that project, as a distinction from the prior project that you had created earlier, capital gains. So, and I love to talk about this, if it doesn't improve, if the project does not increase in value over those 10 years, you don't get any tax benefit.
Exactly. And so the biggest challenge, and this is not something that people say enough, so I'm glad you're bringing it up, Howard, is that a lot of people are just looking at this as, oh my God, look at the tax benefits. And my advice to all of those people is, oh my God, look at the area where that you're investing in, right? Not only you might not make a single dollar, in which case, what tax benefits? You didn't make anything, right? So there's nothing to save. But even worse, your capital is at risk in a lot of these areas. A lot of these, a significant portion of the opportunity zones are the hood. These are areas that are severely depressed. There's no employers in these areas. There's very significant crime. Population growth has been negative. Home price growth has been anemic, or in some cases negative. And so when you look at that area, you say, why would I want to invest in this area? Well, the government, felt that you would say that, and so they gave you a tax benefit, hoping that you would invest in these areas and ignore the fundamental problems with the areas, right? So a whole bunch of these areas, 80+% of these zones, number one, I don't think I'm going to invest there. Number two, I don't think a lot of the locals will invest there because they know what kind of area it is. So I don't think they'll improve. But that still leaves 20%. And if there's 8,700 zones, we're looking at 1,600 census tracts that could improve substantially. So is the program worthwhile? Absolutely. It's just you can't be blind about it and say, if it's an opportunity zone, it's awesome. Your default approach has to be, if it's an opportunity zone, it's a distressed area, and I need to be really careful about investing there.
Yeah, I'd like to make a distinction between a distressed area, a blighted area, and something that is, I think in the words of the statute and the regulations, a low income. Because I had this problem when I first looked at an opportunity zone. I drove around, I'm going, why is this an opportunity zone? Now, there may be certain zones that shouldn't be opportunity zones, but I realized when I drove into the area, not just around the area, the homes that were there were 1940 style homes, haven't been improved, not terrible, not blighted, but obviously a lower income area than the surrounding areas. And I realized that a lot of the opportunity zones are based, since they're based upon census tract, it's based upon the income of the residents in the zone, not
Right.
based upon the commercial real property that's necessarily within the zone. So there may be some good development opportunities, although the income level is not where you might want to live, but can be improved. And then that's the distinction I draw, is low income does not necessarily mean blighted.
I agree. All blighted areas are low income, but all low income areas are not blighted, right?
Good.
There are lots of great low income areas that are not blighted. And I think that those income areas, some of them do have a chance of improving. The problem is, I want to be practical about this. If you're listening to this show, you're probably interested in some form of real estate investment. And you've got to understand that we live in a real world. The government wants social change. They want social justice. But somehow we have to tie the concept of social justice back to what is tangible, what is real, what is likely to happen. So if you've got two non-blighted low-income areas, and one of them has a average income of 24,000, and the other one has an average income of 33,000, that's basically family income. Well, I can tell you that statistically speaking, that the one that's at 33 is much more likely to attract investment than the one that's at 22 or 23. Neither one are blighted, but one of them has a better chance of improving than the other one because its income is fairly close to what you really need for job growth, home price growth, population growth, and those sorts of things. The one that has population growth at 1% a year or greater is more likely to be picked for improvement than the one that has declining population. So bottom line, what it comes down to is they may be perfectly good areas for blue collar workers. That doesn't mean that they're good areas for investment. right? We are looking at investing people's money in for 10 years. So we've got to figure out which of these zones are most likely to be part of the all ships rising effect. So think of opportunity zones as, 8,700 ships. What I'm talking about is 10 to 20% of those ships are going to be rising, and there's simple methodologies that you can apply to figure out which 10 to 20% of the ships are going to have that all ships rising effect, and go invest in those. You're still helping those communities. They are still lower income than the areas around them. They may not be low income, but they're definitely lower income than the areas around it, because otherwise, how would they have gotten picked as opportunity zones?
Well, that's a good question. In some cases, I really don't know how some of them got picked, and I'm afraid to even speculate on that issue. But some of them, it's pretty clear. So are there any other indicia that might help someone consider whether or not it's a good opportunity zone to look into?
So let's say you're comparing two opportunity zones, and one of them happens to be in Cleveland, Ohio, and one of them happens to be in Provo, Utah, right? So you're looking at two zones, and you've looked at the area, and generally there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it. Maybe you've driven it using Google Earth, and it's like, yeah, these are regular areas. I'm not seeing pawn shops or porn stores or things like that. They seem to be just regular places. Now you're trying to figure out, okay, which one of these is better for my dollars when I'm investing? Well, what you should be looking at is, number one, real estate demographics, and number two, opportunity zone demographics. So I'm going to give you some tools, very straightforward tools. Anyone can use them. You shouldn't be spending more than 15 or 20 minutes, but you'll be able to tell which one is much more likely to improve and which one is likely to get significant amount of investment dollars from investors like me. So the first tool is a website, and it's investreal.com. That's the word invest followed by the word real. Put it together, investreal.com. Go to investreal.com. This is a data analytics website. Go create a free account. Make sure you're not buying their $20,000 package. You're just using their free tools. And type in the addresses, maybe one address inside of that opportunity zone in Provo, and one address in a different tab, browser tab, of that Cleveland, Ohio area. And once you do, you'll notice that InvestReal is going to give you a dashboard. And that dashboard is going to say things like, this opportunity zone, in terms of population growth, is better than 90% of the opportunity zones out there. In terms of job growth, it's better than 80%. In terms of home price growth, it's better than 99%, right? So the one in Provo, Utah is going to have some astonishingly good numbers, where it's basically better than 90% of the US's opportunity zones, or 95%. Now, keep in mind that all of the other big players out there are doing the same math. They're looking at that same dashboard and going, well, I'd probably want to invest in Provo, Utah, because it's already much better than all the other opportunity zones. And so it has a better chance of, in being part of that all ships rising effect. So investreal.com is going to give you this very nice dashboard completely for free that will allow you to compare different opportunity zones, because you might, through Howard Klein's program, get access to 2, 3, 4, or even 10 opportunity zones projects, and you want to be able to compare them. This process shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes, and that's really your first tool to use when evaluating opportunity zones.
Great. Let's move on to the next question. You have one of the things that you like to consider is the developer of the property or the project. And you're very keen on the idea that not all developers, even if they have experience developing, may be the right developer for an opportunity zone project or a particular opportunity zone project. Why don't you embellish upon that?
Sure. So you're looking at a project and you look at the developer's resume, and clearly, he or she has done a great job and has some experience and has built a bunch of buildings, and you see all these pretty buildings on there. The key question to ask them is this: how many times when you built these pretty buildings did you hold on to them? And how many of them did you lease up, right? So every time you build a brand new building, it's empty, right? Whether it's an office building or it's a storage building or it's a multifamily, it was empty. So the first thing you want to make sure is you're working with a developer that is used to lease up, number one. And number two, you're working with a developer that actually likes to hold for the long term. Because the truth is, that when a developer builds a building and immediately sells it empty, well, he's a transactional developer. He likes to. It's almost like he's doing a multifamily flip or he's doing an office flip, right? His flip takes 2 years because he's got to build the damn thing from scratch. But still, it's the equivalent of a flip. What he doesn't have is a big asset management team that gets on the phone with the property manager every single week and nitpicks over every single number and basically shepherds the property through multiple recessions. Remember, opportunity zones, you're in it for a minimum of 10 years. Why minimum? Because the last investor that invests has to be in for 10. It might take 6 months, 9 months to raise the money, in which case you're in for 10 years and 9 months. Well, that's the minimum, and it'll still take time for them to sell the property after that. So in 11 years, you can expect 2 recessions. In 11 years, you can expect all sorts of bad things to happen. You can have 1 or maybe even 2 crime sprees happen in that neighborhood. That's going to affect that neighborhood. And imagine if you're with this developer who builds these gorgeous Taj Mahal-like buildings, but he never fills them up and he never holds on to them. Well, he's not the right guy for you. You want somebody that is partnering with you for your money all over that 11-year journey, and he's used to doing that before. Don't work with developers that are holding for the first time ever because they don't know all of the challenges that come with holding a property.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Does it make any difference if they have skin in the game?
In my mind, that's another way of knowing whether these are truly developers that you should be working with. So from time to time, I come across developers who say, I have skin in the game. But what they mean is that I'm going to build this building and I'm going to sell it in 2 years and get my money out. My question to you is, Mr. Developer, how much of your personal money is going to stay invested in this property for those 11 years? I want to make sure that if I'm investing 100 grand in this property, that you're investing more than 100 grand in this property and that money stays in until the day my money is in there. My money and your money should stay in as long together. And if you're not willing to do that, then where's the skin in the game for you? You're just taking the fees. You're just enjoying those fees. So I think skin in the game is a very important concept because I have to tell you this very honestly. I've had some projects where I've had more skin in the game than others. And I think I thought about those projects differently. And you want that mindset in your developer.
Yeah, I think both of us have heard a lot of the hype. And I'm very confident that you and I are from the perspective of slow down a second. Just you need to do this correctly. All right. So yesterday, maybe I had to switch this. Yesterday, I get an email flyer of a listing in here in Las Vegas, and of course, it's like, here's the property. First of all, it was a lousy flyer. But the second, which could have been or should have been a clue, but then it says in an opportunity zone. All right,
that's a clue by itself, right? So.
Yeah, that's like, well, do you really know what that means? And what they showed is this beautiful building in an opportunity zone, and apparently, what the owner, the seller, had done was already improved the property. Now, Why don't you mention, and now this isn't exactly on point of what we were going to talk about, but it's the kind of thing that you should, if you're interested in buying a property in an opportunity zone, why don't you say why that's a problem if the seller already improved the property?
Sure. So one of the concepts that the government had was they didn't want you to just go out and invest in opportunity zones. They wanted to go out, have you go out, buy something and improve it. And they set a very high bar for improvement. And I can tell you, most investors that go out to buy a property and then basically put some lipstick on this pig are not going to qualify. The property itself is an opportunity zone, but your project will not qualify because you've got to improve it. So for example, if I'm buying a $10 million property and the land is worth $3 million, right? So I buy this property for 10 million, land's worth 3 million. So what I'm in for is 7 million, not including the land. Well, the government says you've got to put an additional $7 million into this property. So 90% of these flyers that are being sent out for buildings that are in opportunity zones, there is no opportunity. There's no way to legally comply with opportunity zone law, even if you hold them for 10 years, because you're never going to improve that property by that much money, or you'll end up ridiculously over improving the property. So I think that that's just deceptive marketing. There's no play there. There's no opportunity zone opportunity there.
Yeah, so I think it's important for people to understand that if they're looking to invest in real property, they need to be able to look at how much money there actually is going to have to go in there to stay, or actually first to get in compliance, to get the tax advantages, and then stay in compliance, which leads me to my next question. Let's talk a little bit about the red tape. Not only becoming an opportunity zone project that is subject to the tax benefits, but staying in compliance for 5, 7, or 10 years, or however long you intend to hold.
Right. So various pieces on compliance. Obviously, every investor is required to submit a form each year as long as the property is kept. The big compliance, though, is not that form, because honestly, it's a straightforward form, and you're telling the IRS, hey, I invested this money, I'm still in there. The big compliance is, let's say I'm a developer and a recession happens. So you put $100,000 into my property and a recession happens and the property goes upside down, which, by the way, is much easier on an opportunity zone project, because remember, what am I doing? I'm trying to take an area that is income is below the median, and I'm trying to make a beautiful property there, because either I have to make it from scratch or I have to really, really improve it to qualify in the first place. So now I might end up with the most expensive property in an area that really doesn't support that. So when a recession happens, I could very easily go upside down. I could be losing money on that property. Now, as a developer, even if I'm losing money on this property and I sell it before 10 years, basically my investors are going to lose the benefit. And if I sell it before 5 years, they're going to lose all the benefits. And if I sell it, let's say in year 7, they're going to lose most of the benefits. Year 9, they'll still lose the biggest benefit, in my opinion, which is that all the profit that I've made at that point of time, that the capital gains on those were going to be tax free. Now, of course, if the building is losing money, that's not a benefit at all, because you haven't made any money. But staying in compliance is an issue. Now, one of the things that I determined early on, Howard, is I'm not going to create a multi-property fund, because that's even worse for compliance. So one of the things that's not fully clear is if I stick 5 properties into a fund and one of them gets sold early, in certain circumstances, it could impact your compliance on the other 4, the ones that are still in the fund. There are cases where if you don't do it right, you're actually now non-compliant with all 5 properties. So one of the early decisions I made is all of my funds are going to be single property fund. So that way it's easier for me to be compliant over the 10-year time frame of the property. You're also looking for developers to say things like, we understand that we can't effectively sell the property if something's wrong, because you're going to lose a lot of tax benefits. So you want them to say things like, well, because of this, we're a little more conservative. We're keeping a larger operating budget. We have a vault where we're keeping extra money so that if something bad happens, we can continue to run the property for a year or 2 rather than just selling it. Those are all compliance issues that are really new to opportunity zones that you didn't have to deal with in non-opportunity zone projects.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is holding onto the property for 10 years. That's a long time to stay in compliance. I just think that so much could go wrong. So when you're considering a project, you really have to consider having the experts for that full period of time to make sure that you remain in compliance. This is not for the average investor. I mean, the average investor can get involved, but they better have experts with all kinds of backgrounds that know what they're doing, and it's a 10-year hold.
Yep. And I think that You're exactly right. I really don't think that this was designed for average Joe to do by himself. This was really designed for professionals to do and have average Joes involved. Um, as an example, my focus has been on new construction because there's certain amounts of time that you have to construct and buy the land and basically get it ready. And what I'm finding is it's easier to do on new construction builds. So if you are looking to invest your money into opportunity zones, I want you to ask your developer, how far are you really from breaking ground? How many are your permits approved? Could you get stuck? Because the penalty for getting stuck before you can construct in an opportunity zone, that penalty is much higher than the penalty in a regular project because it might knock the entire project out of compliance, right?
Now,
So it's very important that they build and build quickly and get to that finish line by the end of year 2 or year 3.
now, when you say new construction, are you talking about vacant land, or are you talking about a total tear down and a rebuild?
It could be both, right? So when you're doing a tear down and rebuild, you're actually making it harder to be in compliance because there are lots of rules that apply to the tear down. You can't just go there and basically run a bunch of bulldozers across. There's foundation and other issues. So tear downs are actually going to be more challenging, and very easily a neighborhood group could come in and say, well, you're tearing down our community center, and put a stay on it. So land is actually better because it's ready, right? And you probably already spend the time to remediate it and get it ready for new construction. From what I'm seeing, Howard, most of the money appears to be going into just let's build on land type projects. I'm not seeing a lot of tear down projects, and I'm also not seeing a lot of heavy improvement projects. The one of the ideal scenarios is you have a blighted building. It's got the right bones, but it's empty, and you go in there and you really improve the building. Maybe you turn it into a hotel or into a multifamily. I'm not seeing a lot of that happen yet. I'm hopeful that that happens in the future because those buildings are a blight to that neighborhood. The neighborhood may not be blighted, but that building is. And so if people could go in and improve them, that substantially improves the quality of the neighborhood.
You've given us a number of different indicia in terms of determining whether or not it's a good opportunity zone. What about if it's a good state? And there are probably a number of different considerations, but one of which would be whether or not a particular state is going to give the same tax benefits with regard to the just like the feds are. And I know some states have already agreed to it, some states haven't, and some states are considering it in modified fashion, like California. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's something to research, but I don't consider it to be a primary focus. I think the federal benefits are really my primary focus. You're going to miss out on some of the better states that haven't agreed on it. I live in California. I love California. I don't invest here because this is a very landlord unfriendly state. It's a very tenant friendly state. So I'm one of those very honest people that say, I'm a liberal Democrat, cut me and I'll bleed blue, but I only invest in Republican states. That's because I'm a fiduciary of other people's money. I'm a real estate guy, and I have to go to where landlords are respected and landlords are not considered to be an evil. And I'm not sure California is quite that mindset at this point in time. But having said that, if you live in California and you like investing in California, I have to tell you some of the best opportunity zones, the highest opportunity zones that are ranked in the US are in California. So in my mind, I don't think it is the state's approach to taxation. I do think it is the state's approach to tenant law and landlording. That is very important. 10 years you have to live with these tenants. 10 years, right? So in my mind, I'd much rather go to a state that's extremely landlord friendly, even if it's not matching the federal benefits, because at least my tenants there are going to behave, because the state's not, giving them outrageous rights or, having me take a year to evict people.
We're about almost 30 minutes into this show. Why don't you take an opportunity to let people know how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. So the best way to get in touch with us is through our learning website. It's called Multifamily U. That's www.multifamily followed by the letter U.com. And when you go there, you're going to notice dozens and dozens of different knowledge webinars. These are all deep dive webinars from experts. For example, we have two separate separate opportunity zone experts. We've got experts for 1031 and syndication. We've got experts that talk about city analytics. And so we do about 100 webinars a year that 30,000 people a year register for. All of them are free. Nobody has to sign up for anything. There's no one trying to sell you, timeshares or any kind of silly sort of thing. We're building just a community where people come in and they gain education. So multifamilyu.com is the best place. Or if you like Facebook, just Google Magic of Multifamily, and that's our Facebook group. Those are the two ways to get in touch with me. I promise if you go to our website or that Facebook group, you'll definitely have a way to get in touch with me personally. I love answering questions, so I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, we do have a similar background, which I'll get to. But if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me at howard@creradio.com, or just go to the website and leave a message for me. A similarity that you and I have is that we both believe in educating people. And hopefully, if we educate people well enough, they'll be interested in what we can do for them in addition. That's how we make money. Mm-hmm. Another similarity is you have been in the education business, not just online, but so have I. Mm-hmm. In the 1980s, yeah. Mm-hmm. In the second half of the 1980s, I was general counsel for a large national vocational school chain. And that's where I got, it wasn't the first place that I got my real estate experience, but I basically traveled the country, found locations, negotiated the deals, make decisions, what made sense, etc. So we've both been in the education business, so to speak. So I bet you didn't know that about me.
No, I didn't. Can you give me the name of that chain?
It was Allied Education Corporation. We had 14 subsidiaries. And I was responsible not only for the legal stuff, but all of the real estate stuff. So there was a time that I was very much into that, and I believed in it, and I still do. So
I think it's powerful education. I think it's powerful education.
Oh, absolutely. So let's go back to our outline. What's a zombie project?
So one of the things that has happened over time is that a developer starts to believe in a particular project. And so what he does is he goes out and buys a piece of land, and he spends a lot of money doing the zoning and the entitling and changing all of that project. And then he goes out to an architect, and they do all the architectural work. So that now the guy's in for, sometimes millions of dollars if he's already bought the land, or if he hasn't bought the land, he's in for $500,000 in architectural and zoning work. And then he realizes that nobody else believes in that project, right? And so that project doesn't get funded. Nobody gives money. And those projects basically get put on the shelf. So either he keeps the land because he can't get rid of it, or, he still has a long-term hold on the land. And so those projects happen all the time. And what has happened, unfortunately, is some of these zombie projects have been in opportunity zones. And once the opportunity zones were announced, developers were like, now I can make this project work, even though just because it's an opportunity zone is no reason to make a zombie project come back to life. It's dead. It should stay buried. But what I've seen recently is when I go to these opportunity zone conferences, I clearly see these zombie projects. I can see that the skeleton is there. There's definitely no meat on the bone for investors, and it's been dug up and presented to investors for one reason only. That developer wants his millions of dollars back, and he sees a chance to use opportunity zones to get a bunch of, sorry investors and basically take their money and say, this is a great project. So we've seen, unfortunately, a very significant number of zombie projects come up in the last 12 months.
Yeah, this is an important point to make. This is not easy stuff. And just because it's in an opportunity zone, it doesn't mean anything. And a lot of the stuff that we're hearing is people go, opportunity zone, opportunity zone. Wow, it's crazy. And there's a lot of work that has to go into determining whether or not this makes sense. I've spent hundreds of hours. I'm fortunate. I've been an attorney for 43 years, commercial real estate attorney, not a tax attorney. So I'm not an expert on tax law, and I will always associate with a tax attorney on any opportunity zone project that I work on, as well as an accountant or CPA that's very familiar. But there's not a lot of people who are really familiar with opportunity zones, and the reason for that is this is really new.
Yep.
And in order to know about it, you have to spend a bunch of time and in some cases take a few lumps. And I could tell you stories about discussions that I had where I would ask someone a question, and honestly, I've had to learn, and I'm still learning. It's not going to stop for a while. That's why I'm focusing on it. It's like, boy, I've got a long runway here that I can still play with for a long time. And as I said, I'm fortunate because I've got the time and the ability to focus on this. Not every attorney has the opportunity and the time to focus on this. They got all kinds of other things that they have to work on. This is my predominant niche. So I'm learning along with that. And I forgot the reason why I went into that diatribe. I was so much into that, and it really had to do with I guess, when you were talking about zombie projects, it's like, guys, you really need to, I suppose it's self-serving. Not suppose, I know it's self-serving. Speak to experts like Neal or come to me, and we'll put together a team. And I'd love to have, if I have a project, bringing Neal on as part of a team. And what are your thoughts on the team approach?
I am very much for it. So I am involved in 15 projects, well over $200 million in value. I don't have a single project where I am the team. I don't have a single project where just my company employees are the team. For every project, I've partnered with people. One of the big reasons is geographic closeness. So my first opportunity zone project happens to be in Provo, Utah, in one of the most high quality opportunity zones in the US. I'm not even sure how it became an opportunity zone, but that's a discussion for another day. Keep in mind that each governor had the right to designate a certain number of census tracts, even if those tracts were not distressed, even if those tracts were not below income. It was a small number, but each governor had the ability to put some tracts in. So I'm just thinking that maybe the governor's brother-in-law or sister-in-law has land in this particular tract, and that's why it got picked. So good for me. So when I'm doing that project, I live in California, right? So I can fly out there once a week or once a month. But what's nice is I have a partner that lives 5 minutes away. And interestingly, that partner and I have worked on $100 million worth of projects, none of them in the state of Utah. So now finally I get to do a project that is 5 minutes from his home. So not only can he bring his construction background to it, he can actually also bring in the fact that he's literally boots on the ground.
Yeah, why don't we take advantage of this opportunity to talk a little bit about your project?
Sure. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is that opportunity zones are really about understanding demographics. Go into areas where there's very high job growth, very high income growth, very high population growth, very high home price growth, and crime is reducing. And if you can throw education into that, it is the perfect mix. So when you do that thing on Investrial, remember that I told you about? Go into, look at Provo, Utah, and it's going to be very easy for you to pick out that opportunity zone. And there's a lot of websites that show you the opportunity zone. So zoom in Provo, Utah, and go to Investrial and type those numbers in. And you're going to be absolutely stunned at just how insane this particular opportunity zone is. In terms of its income growth, it is better than 99% of all opportunity zones in America.
Wow.
99%. In terms of its job growth, it's better than 90%. So we basically looked at those numbers and we're sort of gaming the system in a very legal, kosher way. We're gaming the system saying, well, all ships are already rising here. The job growth ship is rising. The population growth is rising. Crime is coming down, so that ship is rising. We're going to go into that particular neighborhood. Yes, we're going to pay more for land. But think about it. Of course, you pay a lot for land, but land is still only a single-digit percentage of your project. So this particular project, land is about $9 or $10 million for $130 million project. So yeah, my approach is let's pay for the land because you're still going to end up paying the same for construction that you would have paid in Detroit, Michigan, or parts of Detroit that are not doing well. You would have paid the same construction cost. But now you've got this amazing 10-year effect where incomes are going up, rents are going up. And so it's like a plane, right? Howard, the best way to describe it is it's a plane. A plane goes at 550 miles an hour. But if you have a 200-mile tailwind, a demographic tailwind, now your plane's going 750 miles an hour. And if you have a 200-mile demographic headwind, like certain parts of Detroit, then your plane is going 350. Which would you rather be in? A plane that's going at 750 or a plane that's going at 350? It's still the same plane. It comes from Boeing or Airbus. So nothing's changed. You're working just as hard, but you're going a lot faster because of tailwinds and headwinds. And so that's been my focus. I'm glad to say my Provo project has incredible demographic tailwinds. It's primarily a multifamily project, but it has some office components, some condo components to it. To reduce the risk further, we've split it up into 4 different phases. And phase 1 of the project, when we announced it, I'm delighted to say this, and I'm not exaggerating. We received $16 million worth of verbals on a phase that only had $3 million in equity within 48 hours. Because people understood what we were saying. They understood the philosophy of why people should be investing in Provo, Utah. They love the fact that it is a very, very landlord-friendly state where evictions can happen in 14 days. They love the fact that the city was gifting land for the project and building a $5 million flyover bridge, which allowed us to be designated transportation-oriented development, reducing our parking cost, right? So city engagement is key. Skin in the game is key. And the fact that all the developers involved in this project, not just me, not just my partner who lives in Provo, everyone involved has a track record of holding assets for long-term durations. And everyone's got management and asset management teams to managing those assets. So super excited.
Great. I'm excited for you. And of course, if someone's interested, they should get a hold of you. You've already given that information at Grow Capitus. Do you have anything else to add?
I think we mostly spent our time, Howard, bashing opportunity zones, right? And what I want to say is that in no way did anything that we say today cheapen the initiative. I think it works. I think opportunity zones work. I just think that all of them don't work. And unfortunately, a lot of the projects out there in the marketplace are on the wrong side of the demographic wheel when it comes to opportunity zones. If you have 15 to 30 minutes to do your research, you can get past that problem and enjoy all of the benefits. So I encourage you to take the time to do that research, spend some time on investrial.com, plug in 5 or 6 random zones, and immediately you'll become an expert because you're going to see the difference between those 5 and 6 zones. You'll know where to invest. You'll know where not to invest. It is a marvelous initiative. And yes, I look at it as a real estate guy. I look at it as a opportunity for my investors to make money. But I have to say, I feel good about the fact that we're taking an area and improving it. We get an automatic social justice pat on the back from God for doing what we're doing in an opportunity zone.
Yeah, I will be doing a number of different shows on what I consider to be a bit of a paradox regarding the opportunity zone projects. Because I do have concerns of gentrification and pushing people out of these zones. So I think they're probably, and as I said, that's another whole topic, but I think there should be some attention paid to whether or not we are fulfilling the social justice and opportunity part of these projects and these zones. So with that being said, thank you very much, Neal, for joining me. We are going to be taking a break for station identification. And Neal, why don't you hold on after that? I will close the show and then I'll bring you back on and say my private thank yous. All right?
Thanks for having me on the show, Howard.